Hi, everyone. Well, this is very exciting. We've just got our first webinar. This is our very first webinar in the community. So I'm hoping that some people join us. I'll be online for 30 minutes, happy to answer questions or have a chat or whatever people feel like doing. So I thought while we're waiting, I thought that I would give you an overview of my journey and why I started the community, because I think that's probably something that people want to know about. So my journey in terms of getting pregnant, or trying to get pregnant rather, has started in 2020. Yes. So that's when I did my first egg harvest. And it was then I decided in the August that I was going to try IVF. At the time, I was 45 and I needed to, 44, turning 45. And I had to basically, you could only use your own eggs, harvest your own eggs up until the age of 45. So it was quite a time crunch. So a friend of mine was going through IVF and I thought, well, you know, it's now or never. And I always thought I'd find someone. I always thought I would have a family, and I always thought I'd be with someone. And I was married and I got divorced in 2008, and I never met anyone. And I always said I don't want to do it on my own. And then when it got to 2020, I was just like, yeah, I just need to do it because there's no one on the horizon. So I met with a fertility doctor and did the egg harvesting. I had no idea about the importance of things like diet, lifestyle, any of that in terms of your focusing on your egg quality. I thought, I still was drinking alcohol. I mean, not crazy amounts, but I just had no idea the impact of things that have on your egg quality. And if I knew what I know now, then would have done things differently. Not that I probably would have made a massive difference, but I just think if you're spending that much money, you need to make sure you give yourself as big a chance as possible. So I did my egg harvest in the November. Before that, I chose a sperm donor because I was single. Not that there was a lot of choice. When I went online to find someone, there was 13 guys on there, only one was Caucasian. And they say that you should have someone that is the same ethnicity as you because it makes it easier for the child, because it means that they can understand exactly, where they come from, because they can see it. Whereas if I'd had, the others were Asian. So if I had an Asian sperm donor, potentially, the child would have looked Asian and then would have looked at me and gone, well, I don't understand. How do I look like this and you look like that? So that was the importance of having a Caucasian donor. But because it was just coming out of COVID, there wasn't actually that much choice because people hadn't been donating because of COVID. So anyway, I got my sperm donor. I went for the egg harvesting. Well, first of all, you have to do about a week and a half injections. You have to go for blood tests. You have to go for ultrasounds, because they have to make sure that you've got, they have to check and see when you're ready to actually harvest. So I did a blood test and I got called and was told that today's the day to do the trigger tonight, come in first thing in the morning. So I went in first thing in the morning, and the procedure I had, we had it under, it wasn't a local, but it wasn't a full general. I don't really know what it's called, but it's kind of like a half and half. But so it didn't hurt at all. And I woke up in the recovery bay, and what they did was they put a piece of tape on your hand with the number of eggs they collected. Because obviously, whenever you're doing egg harvesting, your first question when you wake up is how many? And so this is why they put it on your hand, so you can see. So even if there's no one around you, you can see exactly how many you've got. And in my case, it was 3 eggs, which is not great, because it turns out that one of my ovaries was perimenopausal, so only one was producing eggs, which then resulted in the fact I only had 3. I was kind of hoping for 10, but you take what you can get. So and then it was a case of waiting. So they do the egg harvesting. They have to check and see if they're mature enough to fertilize. And of those 3, only one was mature enough to fertilize. So then they fertilize that one. Then you have to wait and see if that works. And that did work. And then once that egg has been fertilized, you then have to wait to see if it divides. And they wait until day 5 to put it back in. So they give you a bit of a progress report. And it got to day 3 and they said you're at 8 cells, but there's not much progress happening. So we're worried that you're not going to make it to day 5, but we're going to wait and see. We'll call you on day 5 in the morning and let you know if we can do the transfer or not. And unfortunately, I got the call on the day 5 in the morning that my little eggie had not done any more multiplying and was stuck at 8 cells. So it wasn't worth doing a transfer, which was really upsetting. It's funny, you don't really know, and I think that's part of the reason the community is so important to me. You don't really know until you're in the situation how you're actually going to feel about all this. And I remember I got a phone call. I was on the beach with friends and I was really upset because I really wanted this. And I hadn't really realized how much until I got the call that no, it hasn't worked. So I got another call that day from the nurse asking, checking I was checking with me, checking I was okay. And then I got a call from my fertility specialist later that day as well, saying, so do you want to go again? And I was just like, what? I haven't even processed what's happened. I'm not committing to going again yet. And besides which, the chances at my age of getting pregnant using my own eggs was 2%, 2. And then the fact that one of my ovaries is not working, to me, in my mind, that immediately cut that 2% in half to 1. And so I was kind of like, the chances are so slim. And I'd realized then that how much the up and down is of waiting, just waiting. Okay, how many eggs will I get? How many will be mature? How many will be fertilized? How many will make it to day 5? It's kind of like, and I now know that even if you get 10 eggs, there's no way 10 will make it to day 5. You might get 2 or 3 at day 5 that will be embryos, but there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of hope that goes into it. And I said this to her and I said, well, maybe I need to look at other options. And so she said, oh, you could look at donor embryos, but we don't do it in Australia really, or it's harder because you have to find someone that's willing to donate an embryo, and you can't do double donation, which means that another single woman who'd had donor sperm and had embryos in the freezer couldn't give them to me because that's double donation, because that sperm would have then been on donated to me. So you have to find a couple that has got embryos that they're no longer going to use and they're happy to give to me. And then she said the chances of doing that are really slim because most couples give to other couples. They don't want to give to a single person. So I just thought, well, she said another option is to go overseas. And there's places in Spain, there's places in Russia. Well, there was a couple other places as well that she recommended to me. And so I just thought, okay, well, let's look at that as an option. The other thing I really liked about donor embryo option was that I didn't have to wait. I already knew that embryo was at day 5, and I felt like, therefore, a lot of the uncertainty had been covered. Obviously, there's 2 ways to go around donor embryos. One is to find somewhere which has embryos already fertilized at day 5 in the freezer, or to get yourself an egg donor and use donor sperm like I did initially. So what you would do is then you get your egg donor, you then have to wait. They do the egg harvesting. You have to wait and see how many eggs they get, see how many mature, see how many get fertilized, see how many make it to day 5. So you have still got that hoping, waiting, will it, won't it, potentially you don't get anything, or you could get a lot more than one. You could get, say, 3 or 4, depending on the age of the egg donor. And I spoke to a couple of different clinics, and obviously if you go with an egg donor, it's harder because of that waiting and the uncertainty. It also potentially takes longer because so say they found me an egg donor, they went through the first cycle with her and she didn't get any embryos. So then you've got to wait for her to go through another cycle, or they find someone else and they go through another cycle. Whereas the other option that I ended up going with was the actual going to a clinic, and it was a clinic in Barcelona in Spain, called the Institute Marquez, and they actually had a freezer full of embryos. So they had, I think it was 2,500 embryos in the freezer. And what they did was, when they had someone like me come along, they basically looked at who was the egg and who was the sperm donor, and they tried to match the characteristics. They made sure that you had, someone was Caucasian. In my case, I've got quite light colouring. So, that kind of thing. I mean, obviously it's never going to be an exact match, but this is what they tried to do. And then what they do is, when you agree to go ahead with it, you then, they defrost an embryo for you on the day you arrive to have the transfer. And then if they take one out and it doesn't defrost properly, or it falls apart when it defrosts, they just get another one out. So it means that you're going to get one that's going to work regardless. They're not going to put one that's falling apart into you. They're going to put one they think is going to work. So to me, that seemed like a better bet. It seemed a better option for me, because I didn't like the whole uncertainty, and it wasn't I didn't like the uncertainty. It was more that I just found it really hard I guess I always thought, and this is another reason I started the community, I didn't have enough information about my own fertility, and I certainly didn't have enough information about IVF before I started the process. And my philosophy was, well, I'll just do what I have to do to get it done. And so, for example, when you do the egg harvesting and you have to inject yourself with the needles, I'd have just seen it on TV shows, and I saw that it would look like an EpiPen. I was like, well, that's okay. And then I get the drugs, and it's proper full-on needle, full-on, put it in a container, pull out, draw out the amount of liquid, stick it in your tummy. It's really not pleasant. But I thought, well, there'll be things like that, but I just have to deal with them. But I think now, looking back, what I should have done is done a lot more research into how does the process work? What is the best option for me, rather than actually just assuming that the doctors knew and would give me the best option. I'm not saying the doctors don't know, but I am saying that they don't give you all of the information that you necessarily want or need to make the decision. So my first fertility specialist, she put me on DHEA. She put me on progesterone. She put me on a few different things, which was to improve egg quality. But I think she didn't say anything about diet. She didn't say anything about exercise. She didn't say anything about losing weight. And I just think that all could have helped. And I think when you're 44, 45, the chances are slim enough as it is. So you need all the help you can get, however it comes. Anyway, so going back to my donor embryos. So I decided to do them in February 2021. I decided to do it, and I decided to do it in June 2021. Slight challenge was that I was living in Sydney, Australia, and you weren't allowed to leave the country unless you got permission from the government. And I applied for permission, and the first time I got declined, despite the fact I had a medical note from my GP and from my doctor in Spain. So then I had to apply again, and luckily the second time it did get approved, but that was pretty stressful. And then I had to get, basically my GP in Australia did a lot of the tests for me, which we sent to the clinic. And then I arranged to fly over to London to stay with family. And then from London, I went to Barcelona for the transfer. Now, stepping back, when I first started talking to the clinic about the transfer, they said, well, you can pay for one, or we do this deal where you pay for 3 in advance. And if none of them work, you get 50% of your money back. And I was like, no, it's going to work the first time. I don't need to do that. Yeah, no, mine didn't work the first time or the second time. And I now know that on average, it takes people 3 attempts to get pregnant through IVF. So 3 transfers, which is why they do that 3 thing. And it would have made a lot more sense to do that at the time. But yeah, you know, live and learn. So I just paid for the one, thinking it's going to work. I thought, going over in the middle of COVID, it's so got to work. So flew to the UK. Then I had a few days there. Then I flew to Spain. We did the transfer, and I stayed in Barcelona for a few days. And the transfer is very, very easy. I just went to the clinic. I'd already had blood tests. I'd been using the pessaries. I had an ultrasound in London, so we knew that my thickness of my uterus, it normally needs to be about 8 mil, was about right. And then I went to the clinic in Spain and they did the transfer. It didn't hurt at all. It's just like having a smear test. It's really, really nothing. And you get to see on the ultrasound, they have an ultrasound, and you can see them. We can't really see, but because remember the embryo at this time is like, you can kind of like fit 3 on one hair on your head, so it's minute. So you can't actually see it shoot up inside you or anything, even though the ultrasound's on. But what they do is they pop it in, and then they have to go and check that it's not left in the straw, in the pipette thing, to make sure it's actually stuck. And then after that, I basically just went back to the hotel. Didn't really do much, chilled, and then flew back to London and waited. And then we come to the fun bit, which is called the 2-week wait, which is the bit that everyone finds hard, because you so desperately want to be pregnant, and you just not much you can do to influence it at that point. And you have these drugs that you need to take, and I was taking oral tablets as well as progesterone pessaries that you put up inside your vagina, which is not pleasant. And then you just have to just hope that it's sticking, and you don't get any kind of like indication until you do your pregnancy test. And they recommended I do my pregnancy test on day 10. And they did say to me, if it's not positive, doesn't mean it's negative. It might mean that your HCG levels are not high enough to be measured on the pregnancy test. So when you use a pregnancy test, depending on the test you use, there's two different strengths, I guess you'd call it, of measuring. There's ones that measure an HCG of 10 or more, and there's ones that measure an HCG of 25 or more. Now, to be considered pregnant, really, it's over 5. Your HCG level should be over 5. But when you first get pregnant, your HCG levels, whatever number they're first at, they would need to double every 48 to 72 hours to continue the pregnancy. So what normally happens is you can do a pregnancy test at home. It doesn't give you a number, obviously. And then you would go to the doctors and they would do a blood test and they would see how you're tracking. And that's how they would know, if it's still viable or not. So in my case, I did the pregnancy test. I think I did it on day 8. It was negative. Did it on day 9, negative. Did it on day 10, negative. I was really upset. I remember crying, really upset. It was hard. It's so hard. And this is the thing that no one tells you. Well, I felt no one tells you how hard it is. No one tells you how upset you're going to be. No one tells you. And there's nothing anyone can do. Nothing. And that's what just makes it so hard, isn't it? I was talking about this yesterday when I was doing interviewing Ginash, and whether the embryo implants or not is just like, so the embryo goes into your uterus and then it kind of decides, like, does it look nice in here? Do I fancy it? Do I not fancy it? There's no kind of like, it's not like, oh, it's uterus, yay, let's hang on to the wall. It just makes a decision then if it's going to implant or not. And for me, mine didn't. But the clinic said you need to go for a blood test to check. And I went for a blood test. My HCG was 2, which is not pregnant. So that was that. Now, I was due to fly out 3 days later to come back to Sydney. And I decided, I was so upset. I was just so upset. I just thought, I need to go again. I need to do it again. I need to see, like, I've come all this way. I've done what's felt like a million COVID tests between leaving and coming between countries that I need to try again. So I spoke to the clinic. I spoke to my friend who's a travel agent, and the next flight she could get me on was in August. At that point, there wasn't many flights going back to Australia, which is why we kind of had to time it with the flight. And the flight, so that was actually worked out about, I think it was about 6 or 7 weeks away from where I was at that time. So I said to the clinic, okay, this is the deal. I want to do another go, but I'm on the plane on this day. So what can we do to get me ready and in for next time? So they recommended that, first of all, that I fly back to Barcelona and have a hysteroscopy and a biopsy. So basically what that is, I flew back, it was just a quick, I mean, you call it procedure. They just basically put water inside your uterus and to check for inflammation and infection. And that's what the biopsy is for, infection. And they found, because apparently lots of women actually have infection and inflammation in their uterus, but it doesn't affect you in terms of everyday life, it doesn't hurt. And so really there's nothing that you need to worry about it. But when you're getting pregnant, you obviously want your uterus to be in top nick, to be as good as it can. So inflammation and infection is not good. So basically they put me on anti-inflammatories and antibiotics for 4 weeks to get rid of that. And then they booked me in for the actual embryo transfer a week or so after that. But in the meantime, we had to make sure that my period timed in to make sure that we could fit it all in. So I also had to take the pill, and then also I had to still get the ultrasounds, vaginal ultrasounds done. I got them done in London. So I had to find a clinic to get those done. I had to find clinics to get blood tests done. It's challenging when you're not in the country that you live in trying to do IVF. It's challenging. And then obviously the medication. There's just a lot of things to organize. So it is quite, it's not just money and time, and emotions, it's the planning. And it's like, okay, so I've got to take this 10 days before. So today's a Tuesday. So count that back. And so I take this that day. And then I do 1 a day. And then I go up to 2 a day. And then I had all these like plans of pills. And at one point I felt like when I was taking the anti-inflammatories and the antibiotics and the other, like the pill and all these other things I was supposed to be taking, I was just like rattling around. At one point I was on 10 pills a day or 15 pills a day. It was crazy. Anyway, luckily there was no injections at that point. But then I went back to Spain, and this time I thought, well, I want to give it a better chance. So I had acupuncture 4 times before I left the UK, and then twice more in Spain. So once every week for 4 weeks, and then once before I went in for the procedure, for the transfer, and then once after. And that's supposed to relax you and help you. But again, that's another thing. I hadn't even known about that the first time I did the transfer. And so it's just interesting how it's not like there is or maybe there is books where it's got a 101 or articles where it's a 101, but I certainly didn't see them. And no one, I think as a patient, you're relying on the clinic to tell you these things. And often they don't, because they see so many people and they just assume that you know because they know. So why wouldn't you know? And it's one of those things, you don't know what you don't know. So anyway, went to the clinic. This time my youngest brother decided he was going to come with me, which was really nice, but also felt a little bit strange because I'd already been to the clinic twice on my own. And then I turned up the third time with a guy. So I made a big point of making sure they knew it was my brother. And we had a few days in Barcelona. So the day of the transfer, went and did the acupuncture. We had to wait around for the embryo to defrost. Then I went in and we did the transfer. And this time we could actually see the embryo on the ultrasound and saw where it got implanted, which is very exciting. And they printed out a picture and they said, oh, this is so lucky that you've seen this. This is great, la, 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 which is, you know, yeah, what can you say? You're obviously hoping and hoping and hoping. And this time they'd also put up some of my drugs, increased the amount of drugs I was taking. So, and that's the other thing with IVF that they don't tell you is that everything, all the protocols, all the procedures are based on an average. So we know for someone your size, your height, your weight, your age, this is what you should have. So this is what we'll give you. But until we actually give it to you and see how your body reacts, we don't know how, if that's the right amount, whether it's too much or too little. But you're kind of, so that first round, I think you're always a bit of a guinea pig. And so you're still hoping, you're just hoping that it works. And there's not much, well, there's no science behind it, but you just don't know. You and the doctor don't know how your body's going to react to this stuff. So that time I went to, yes, I went for did the transfer afterwards. Yeah, I had another couple of days in Barcelona, and then I flew back to London and then flew back to Sydney. And, well, I didn't actually fly back to Sydney, I flew back to Adelaide because there wasn't any flights to Sydney. And then I had to spend 2 weeks, or it was about a week and a half in hotel, 2 weeks in hotel quarantine, but about a week and a half of that was my 2-week wait. And I had to test myself in the hotel. I took pregnancy tests with me, and the first couple were negative again. And then they agreed to send someone in to do a blood test. So we got the blood test done, and it was positive, and I was pregnant. So that was like, oh my God. And then you kind of feel like, even though you don't feel any different to you did the 3 seconds before, you suddenly feel like you're pregnant. And because you're taking all this progesterone and stuff, I was starting to feel very, very sick. Like, and I remember I flew back to Sydney and I had to go to the supermarket and do food shopping, and I felt so ill. I really thought I'm going to have to take one of those plastic containers around the supermarket with me because I don't know if I can make it around without spewing. And I was like, such a good sign. This is so good. This is so good. And I went and had a blood test while I was in Sydney so that we could see how my HCG was increasing. And I got the results on the Monday, and they had gone down. So it hadn't worked. I felt so ripped off. I really felt like, you know, I just really felt that this was going to work. I really felt that I had been to Spain 3 times. I had been to the UK. I had done so many COVID tests. I really thought it was going to work. I really did. And I just felt so unfair that I did all of this and it still didn't work. That's so unfair. And that's, at the time, I had a friend that was she was pregnant actually with her daughter, but she'd been through 6 rounds of IVF to get that. And I had spoken to her every time I'd gone through a stage, and she was the person that I told when I was pregnant. The first person I told, because she knows what it's like. She was the person I told when I got my, HCG results. She was the person I told about, having to have those extra tests, because I wanted to see how, what were her, like, had she gone through it? Had she experienced it? What was I to expect next? And, when I was feeling so sick, I thought I was going to throw up in the supermarket. And that's when I realized that the community is so important, and having friends that have been through it is so important. And it's not that I don't have other friends. I do have other friends. But it's very hard for them to understand if they haven't experienced it, because I know myself, the friend that who was going through IVF, that I first kind of chatted to about it, I was quite blasé with her about it on her first round. And she said to me after that, I don't want to talk to you about it anymore. I said, okay. I hadn't realized how blasé I was until I went through it myself, because you just don't realize what a big deal it is. You just don't understand, because you just think it's just like, I don't know. It's just, you just don't understand if you haven't been through it, which is why part of the reason I started Hoopsy was, first of all, because I was shocked by the number of tests that women were doing and the amount of plastic that literally was being used for 5 minutes and thrown into landfill. And then the other reason was because I thought I didn't have that education. I didn't know about my fertility. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know that I should have started thinking about this earlier. I just thought IVF, it will happen. But no, I thought there's options. And there isn't really. It depends on your age, obviously, and your situation. But, you know, like Rebel Wilson, she just got pregnant via a surrogate. But, you know, we don't all have that amount of money. And to use a surrogate is thousands and thousands of pounds. And you still got no guarantee. And it's not something that everyone can afford to do or even necessarily wants to do. So it makes it very, very, I just feel in some ways it's very, very unfair that, you know, you go to all this effort and emotional upheaval and you don't get what you want. But I know that, you know, life's unfair and these things happen. But one of the things made me realize that I wasn't educated enough, and I wish I had been. And that's one of the reasons I started the community with Hoopsy, because I want people to understand. I want people to know more about their own fertility, to know when they need to start thinking about taking prenatal supplements, to know when they need to start, you know, like the importance of eating well and exercising and being the right, you know, not being overweight and things like that. Just all of that is so important. And I just feel like there's no one that really tells you that. There's no one place to get that information. Like acupuncture, what's the point in doing that? Like, you know, why doesn't anyone really talk about it? And you can find this stuff. You can go into different Facebook groups, but I didn't find them to be that supportive. In fact, when I was in my hotel room going through that 2-week wait, I posted on there and I got some really snarky comments back, and it really upset me. And I just think, you know, it's not a competition who has a baby and who doesn't have a baby. We're all human. We all want to have the same thing. Why can't we help other people? Obviously, you're not going to give them your baby, but you can help support them when you know how hard it is, what they're going through. So that's why joining the community was so, like starting it was so important to me, and having experts was so important to me, because I just felt that no one else is doing that. Everyone else, it's like people that say, oh, my sister's cousin's aunt's daughter had that and this is what happened. Or I know this lady who was 92 and got pregnant naturally. Okay, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but you know what I mean? Like you get all of these urban myths, and do you actually get the real facts? And I think that's what we need. That's what we need, the real facts, so we can make informed decisions. And, you know, if you know that acupuncture will increase the chance of you feeling relaxed, and therefore the chance of the embryo is more likely to implant and attach to the uterus wall, then shouldn't you have that choice to make that decision? Shouldn't you have that information so that you can decide what's best for you? And I just feel like that isn't out there, and that's what I'm really trying to do. And I really hope that this community becomes a place where people can get that information. And I would say that if you've got any questions, however dumb you think they might be, trust me, they're not dumb. I asked some very dumb questions at the start. Well, now I'm thinking that was a bit of a dumb one. But and even things like, I remember I was in a hotel in Barcelona and I having to inject myself every day with blood thinner. And I just threw my needles in the bin because I didn't have a sharps disposal. And I just thought, well, what am I supposed to do? I mean, I put the lid back on. And then someone was like, what are you doing with your needles? And I was like, I'm just putting them in the bin with the lid on. No, you can't do that. I hadn't even thought about asking about that. And because when I got the medication, no one said, do you need a sharps bin? And just like really simple things like that is just so, you just don't know this stuff. And you'd think that was quite common sense, but everyone has so much information and just thinks, I know it, therefore everyone knows it. And that's just not the case. So that's a really long story about how I got to Hoopsy and how I got to the community. And now my goal is, so I see Hoopsy as, we've obviously got the pregnancy test. The goal there is to reduce the amount of plastic that's going into landfill, help women get the right result, not necessarily, when I say right, I mean accurate result. And we'll be doing that. We're actually improving our test, and that will come out later this year to help with that, to support women through their fertility journey, whichever way they're going. And then finally, obviously, we have to make some money so that we can build up the community, because obviously the community is free and it's going to stay that way. It's not going to be a paid community because it's information that everyone needs, and everyone that's in the community is giving their time for free because they believe, like I do, that having that information is so important for women to be able to make the decision, to be able to help them on their journey. Now, I kind of run a bit over time, but if anyone does have any questions, comments, thoughts, then do pop it in the chat, and I will answer them here. Otherwise, it's today's middle of Feb. We haven't got our next speaker organised until the big first week of March, because I kind of thought we'll give it some time to get people in, get people, engaging, and then we'll get more people to the sessions. But all of the sessions are going to be recorded, and if there is anyone that you want to hear, tell me, because I will pick up the phone and call them. And I'm not joking. So let me know if there's anyone that you want, or any particular expertise that you want. And I will make sure that we find someone with that expertise to talk to us and tell us the real truth about that. And thank you to Faye for your comment. And I think I should probably leave it there. It's so lovely to be here and chat to everyone. And I might jump in, do a quick live next week. But and then I've recorded some fantastic video over the weekend, and I'll be sharing that with you during the week. Some really interesting science that's going on in this space. And I will, otherwise, I'll see you in the community. Do DM me, do chat to me. And I look forward to hearing what you've all been up to. And have a wonderful week.
Hi, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit like, and please subscribe to our channel so that you will be the first to know as soon as new videos arrive. Thanks.